I came home from the hospital to find the locks changed on my own front door. My son stood in the doorway, arms crossed, blocking the entrance like he owned the place. He looked at me the way a man looks at something he's already decided belongs to him. "Dad," he said, "we've made some decisions while you were gone. You had a heart scare. You can't manage this place alone anymore. This is our house now." I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked him dead in the eyes, nodded slowly, and said, "All right, son," because he had absolutely no idea what kind of man he just crossed. My name is Gerald Sutton. I'm 62 years old. I've lived in the same house in Lancaster, Ohio for 38 years. I didn't just buy this house. I rewired it from the basement up, rebuilt the back porch twice, and laid every single tile in that kitchen with my own 2 hands. I spent 34 years as a licensed electrician. I know what it means to build something that lasts. My wife Norma passed 2 years ago, ovarian cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to gone. Fast and cruel the way the worst things in life always seem to be. After she left, I kept her herb garden along the south fence. I kept her reading chair by the front window. I kept the porch swing where she used to sit every evening with chamomile tea, watching the fireflies come out at dusk. The house was too quiet, but it was still ours, still hers. I wasn't ready to let any of it go. My son Clyde is 36. He and his wife Wanda had been living in Columbus, riding what he called the wave in real estate investment. Flipping houses, syndication deals, private lending arrangements. He always talked about it with such certainty that I figured he knew what he was doing. I was wrong about that. About 16 months ago, Clyde called me on a Tuesday evening. His voice had that tight, rehearsed quality I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught in a lie. "Dad," he said, "the market shifted. We took some losses. It's temporary, but we need a place to land while we restructure." I asked how bad it was. He said manageable, just a few months. What was I supposed to say? He's my son. My only child, the boy I taught to throw a spiral in the backyard, who cried at his mother's funeral and held my hand the whole way through it. So I said yes. I cleaned out the guest room, put fresh sheets on the bed, and told myself it would be good to have company in that quiet house again. The first few weeks were fine. Wanda cooked dinner a couple of nights. Clyde mowed the lawn without being asked. I thought maybe this was going to work out the way I hoped, but then the little things started. Clyde rearranged the living room furniture without asking, said the layout was inefficient. Then he started in on the thermostat settings, the water pressure, the way I organized the garage. One afternoon I came downstairs and found Norma's reading chair pushed into the corner to make room for his home office equipment. A monitor, a keyboard stand, a filing rack where her chair used to be. When I asked about it, he shrugged and said, "It's just a chair, Dad. You've got plenty of room, just a chair." That was the chair Norma sat in every single night for 20 years. I let it go, told myself he was under pressure. Told myself he'd find his footing soon enough. He never did. Month after month passed. Every job lead he mentioned fell through. Every deal he was close to closing somehow collapsed at the last minute. Meanwhile, he sat in my living room all day on his laptop, ordering takeout, running up charges I'd later find on my credit card statement without a word of explanation. I watched it happening, and I kept making excuses for him. That's what fathers do. We hold on to the version of our kids we raised long after the evidence tells us something different. Then came the surgery. My cardiologist had been monitoring a minor arterial blockage for about 2 years. In the spring, he sat me down and said we couldn't keep watching it. The procedure was routine, he told me. A standard cardiac catheterization. I'd be in the hospital for 6 days, mostly for observation and recovery. Clyde and Wanda both said they'd look after the house while I was gone. Wanda said she'd water Norma's herb garden. Clyde said he'd handle the mail and make sure the place was in good shape when I got back. I thanked them both and believed every word. That was my second mistake. When the cab pulled up to my house that Thursday afternoon, I knew something was off before I even got to the front steps. The mailbox, it used to say G. Sutton in the black stick-on letters Norma picked out the first summer we moved in. She spent 20 minutes at the hardware store choosing the right font. I remember thinking it was funny that she cared so much about something so small. Now I understood why she did. The mailbox said Clyde Sutton. My chest tightened, and it had nothing to do with the surgery. I paid the driver, grabbed my bag, and made my way up the front walk on legs that were still a little unsteady from 6 days in a hospital bed. I tried my house key at the front door. It went in fine but wouldn't turn. The lock had been replaced entirely. The door opened from the inside before I could try again. Clyde stood there filling the frame, arms folded across his chest. He didn't offer to take my bag, didn't ask how I was feeling. He just looked at me with an expression I can only describe as settled, like a man who had already made his decisions and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. "Dad," he said, "good timing, we need to talk." I looked past him into the house. The walls were wrong. The warm yellow Norma had chosen when we repainted in 2009 was gone. Someone had rolled over it with a flat gray that made the rooms look smaller and colder. The family photos that lined the hallway, our wedding portrait, Clyde's school pictures, a framed snapshot of Norma and me at Niagara Falls on our 25th anniversary, all of it gone. Bare walls where 38 years of our life used to hang. "Where are my pictures?" I asked. Wanda appeared behind him. "We boxed some things up," she said. "We're reorganizing, making it more functional." Clyde stepped aside and let me in. I moved through the doorway of my own home like a visitor. Then he said it plainly. The way you say something you've rehearsed enough times that it no longer sounds rehearsed. "Dad, you had a heart scare. You're 62, you live alone, and frankly, this property needs more attention than you've been able to give it. Wanda and I talked it over while you were in the hospital. We're going to be handling things from here on, the house, the finances, the upkeep. You just focus on your recovery." I stood in the entryway and let those words settle over me. "This is my house," I said. "My name is on the deed." He nodded slowly, patient, like a man explaining something to someone who wasn't quite keeping up. "We know that, Dad, but you need to think practically about what makes sense going forward. We're doing this for you." Wanda still wouldn't meet my eyes. They had moved me to the back bedroom, the small one I'd used for storing tools and holiday boxes. No window facing the garden, a cheap twin mattress on a metal frame with a fitted sheet that was too small for it. Norma's things had been cleared out of the master room entirely. Her reading glasses that lived on the nightstand, the framed photo from our 30th anniversary, the small ceramic dish she kept her rings in every night before bed. All of it packed into cardboard boxes stacked in the garage like donations waiting to be dropped off somewhere. I stood in that back room for a long moment. Then I sat down on the edge of that mattress, set my bag on the floor, and breathed slowly until the shaking in my hands stopped. I didn't cry. I didn't say another word to either of them that evening. I thought about every moment over the past 16 months that I had explained away. Every time I told myself Clyde was stressed, that he just needed more time, that things would turn around. I thought about the way he had spoken to me at the front door, that tone, that posture, that absolute certainty. That wasn't a man who was struggling and scared. That was a man who had been planning. And if he had been planning, then there were things to find. The next morning I came downstairs at my usual time, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table like nothing had changed. Clyde came down around 9:30 in a t-shirt and basketball shorts. Barely glanced at me, poured himself a cup, and went back to the living room. Wanda said good morning and asked if I wanted eggs. I said no thank you. Then I told them I needed to stop by the bank to check on a few things. Clyde looked up from his phone. "What things?" "Just routine," I said. "Making sure everything is in order after being away." He and Wanda exchanged a look. Quick, just a flicker, but I caught it. "I can drive you," Wanda said. "You shouldn't be behind the wheel yet." "I'm fine," I said. "The doctor cleared me yesterday. I could use the air." I drove myself to First National Bank. Every bump in the road sent a dull ache through my chest, but I didn't care about that. I needed to see the statements with my own eyes before I said a single word to anyone. Paulette Dowd had been a teller at that branch for over a decade. She knew me and she had known Norma. She pulled up my account without me having to explain much, just said she was glad to see me up and around after the surgery. What I saw in that printout stopped me cold. $27,000 gone, moved out in small transfers over 14 months. Amounts between $800 and $2,400 staggered irregularly so nothing would trigger an automatic alert. Some sent to an account number I didn't recognize. Some applied to credit cards that weren't mine. "Paulette," I said, keeping my voice level, "who else has access to this account?" She typed for a moment. "It shows a Clyde Sutton was added as a joint account holder approximately 13 months ago. There's an authorization form on file. Would you like to see it?" She turned the screen toward me. There was a signature on that form. It looked like mine at first glance, but I always signed Gerald R. Sutton. The middle initial has been the same my entire adult life, R for Raymond, my father's name. This form said Gerald B. Sutton, a forgery. Careless enough that I spotted it in under 10 seconds. Confident enough that no one at the bank had ever questioned it. I thanked Paulette, folded the printout into my jacket pocket, and drove home. I walked back through my front door that afternoon the same way I had walked out of it. Calm, unhurried. I told Clyde the errand went fine and went to my room. I sat on that thin mattress and stared at the printout for a long time, $27,000. My emergency savings. The money I had set aside over years of overtime work, of skipping vacations, of driving the same truck for 11 years, because I didn't need a new one. The money I had told myself was there for medical bills, for whatever the next chapter brought, for my grandchildren someday if Clyde ever got around to having any. Gone in 14 months of small, quiet transfers that nobody was supposed to notice. I didn't sleep much that night either. But this time I wasn't just thinking. I was deciding. The next morning I called my nephew Leroy Garfield. Leroy is 28 years old and works as a forensic accountant for a firm down in Cincinnati. He's the son of my older brother Ned, who passed from a stroke 6 years ago. After Ned died, I made a point of staying close to Leroy. Took him to ball games, helped him move into his first apartment. Showed up to his college graduation when nobody else in the family could make the drive. He never forgot that. He and Clyde had never gotten along. Clyde once made a comment at Thanksgiving that Leroy was too cautious to ever make real money. Leroy heard it and didn't say a word, but I watched his face, and I knew he filed it away. I called him from the back bedroom with the door closed and the TV on in the hallway so nobody could hear me over it. "Uncle Gerald," he picked up on the second ring. "You doing okay? I heard the surgery went well." "It did," I said quietly. "Leroy, I need your help with something, and I need it kept between us for now." He didn't ask why or push back. He just said, "Tell me what's going on." I told him everything. The locked door, the mailbox, the gray walls and the boxed up photos, the bank statement and the forged signature with the wrong middle initial. I read him the account numbers the transfers had gone to. He was quiet the whole time and I could hear him writing things down. When I finished, he said, "Uncle Gerald, this is textbook elder financial fraud. The forged authorization alone is a felony. I can start pulling the transaction trail together this week." He drove down that weekend under the pretense of checking on me after the surgery. Clyde seemed mildly annoyed by the visit, but didn't object. Leroy sat with me on the back steps for an hour, and while we talked about nothing in particular, he had already begun building a picture of every dollar that had moved out of my account. Over the following days, I played the role Clyde had already written for me, the confused older man who'd had a health scare and was losing his grip on things. I repeated questions I already knew the answers to. I forgot where I'd set my coffee mug. I shuffled around slowly and squinted at the mail like I was having trouble reading it. I let Clyde talk over me at the dinner table and didn't push back. He got more comfortable with every passing day. He started making phone calls in the kitchen while I sat in the next room, apparently too foggy to follow a conversation through a wall. He talked about the property's potential. He talked about refinancing. He mentioned a contractor friend he wanted to bring in to look at the foundation. Then Leroy called me one evening with something I hadn't expected. Clyde had filed paperwork for power of attorney. The filing cited early signs of cognitive decline as justification and referenced a physician I had never seen with clinical notes that did not exist. Pure fabrication from start to finish. Leroy had pulled the court filing record before it could advance any further. So it wasn't just the money. Clyde wanted legal control of everything, the house, the remaining savings, every decision about my life going forward. Once that POA was approved, I would have had no standing to dispute anything. He had thought it all the way through. A few days after that, I found the emails. Clyde had left his laptop open on the kitchen table one afternoon while he stepped outside to take a call. I walked past slowly the way a man shuffles when his joints are sore, and let my eyes move across the screen without stopping. There was an email thread with a real estate broker. The subject line was the address of my house. The message discussed square footage, lot dimensions, the updated electrical panel I had installed myself, the new roof from 2019. Near the bottom of the thread was a line that I read twice to make sure I had it right. Once the POA clears, we can move forward with the listing. Comparable sales put us at $280 kilo-win to $290 kilo-win. The lot alone justifies the ask. I kept walking to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and took a long, slow drink. Then I went back to my room and called an old friend named Hank. Hank Pruitt was a retired building contractor I had worked alongside on commercial jobs going back 20 years. Good man, straight shooter, and he owed me a favor from a time I had helped him out of a legal situation involving a subcontractor dispute. I had never called in that favor before. I told Hank what I needed. I needed him to call Clyde and present himself as a private real estate investor looking for off-market residential properties in Lancaster County. I needed him to set up a showing and let Clyde do all the talking. Hank didn't hesitate. "Tell me when," he said. I set it up for the following Thursday afternoon. Thursday came around like any other day in that house. Gray sky, coffee going cold on the counter, Clyde on his phone at the kitchen table by 9 in the morning. Around 11, Clyde got a call. I was in the hallway and heard him shift into that voice he used when he thought something was worth his time. Interested, engaged. The voice I had not heard him use once in the 16 months he had been living under my roof. I went to my room and sat down. Through the wall I could hear him talking about the property. Square footage, the lot size, the location relative to the highway. He said the house had good bones and had been well maintained by the previous occupant. previous occupant. That was me. I was still sleeping 15 feet away. He set the appointment for 2 in the afternoon. I stayed in my room when Hank arrived. I heard them at the front door, heard Clyde invite him in with the easy warmth of a man who smelled a commission. Then I heard them moving through the house, Clyde pointing things out, narrating the place like a tour guide. I had my phone on the nightstand, voice memo running. In Ohio, one party to a conversation needs to consent to a recording. I consented. I heard Clyde walk Hank through the living room, the kitchen, the back hallway. He mentioned the electrical panel, said it had been fully updated. He did not mention that I had done that work myself over a long weekend in 2016. He talked about the roof, the water heater, the garage square footage. He quoted a number, $282,000, said the market in Lancaster County was moving and a motivated seller could close in 60 days. Then Hank asked the question I had told him to ask. What's the situation with the current owner? Is there a timeline we're working around? Clyde's answer came without any hesitation at all. My father owns the property on paper, but he's been dealing with some health issues, cognitive stuff on top of the heart surgery. We're in the process of getting the legal paperwork sorted so we can act on his behalf. Once that clears, probably another few weeks, we can move as fast as you need. Hank said that sounded workable and asked a few more questions about the lot lines. Clyde answered all of them. Then they shook hands at the front door and Hank drove away. I stopped the recording and sat quietly for a moment. That was all I needed. I called Gloria Hatch the following Monday morning. Gloria had been a civil attorney in Lancaster for close to 25 years. I had done the electrical rough-in for her office building back when she was just starting her practice. A 2-week job that turned into a month because the building had more problems than the inspection had caught. I had charged her only for materials on the extra work. She had told me at the time that if I ever needed a lawyer, I should call her before I called anyone else. I had never needed one until now. I drove to her office and laid out everything on her conference table. The bank printout, the forged authorization with the wrong middle initial, Leroy's transaction report mapping 14 months of outgoing transfers, the POA filing with the fabricated physician's notes, the email chain with the real estate broker, and the recording from Thursday afternoon. Gloria listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When the recording finished, she reached over and set it on the table between us and looked at me. "Gerald," she said, "you've got them cold. The forged signature is a felony. The unauthorized account access is elder financial fraud under Ohio statute. The POA filing with falsified medical documentation is fraud on the court, and the recording is clean and admissible." I asked her what my options were. She said I could press for criminal charges, which would mean law enforcement, a DA, and a process that could take the better part of a year. Or I could pursue a civil resolution. Full restitution of the stolen funds, immediate withdrawal of the POA application, a signed confession held in escrow to be filed with the court only if they violated the terms, and vacate the property within 72 hours. If they refuse the civil terms, she said. We filed a criminal complaint the same afternoon. I thought about it for a moment, not long. Set up the meeting, I said. Friday evening. Then I told her there was one more thing I needed to handle on my own before Friday. I had updated my will 2 weeks earlier, shortly after I came home from the bank the first time. I had driven to a different attorney across town, one Clyde had no connection to, and made the change quietly. Clyde had been listed as my sole beneficiary since Norma passed. That was no longer the case. The estate would now pass to a charitable foundation established in Norma's name, directed toward adult literacy programs in Lancaster County schools. It was something she had talked about for years, volunteering at the library on Saturday mornings, helping adults who had never learned to read properly work through their first books. She would have done more of it if she had lived longer. Clyde would find out about the will change on Friday, along with everything else. I drove home, made dinner, and sat on the back steps until the sun went down. The rosemary in Norma's herb garden had grown tall and a little wild while I was in the hospital. I pinched a stem between my fingers and held it for a moment. Friday was 3 days away. I could wait 3 more days. Friday evening came in quiet and cool, the kind of early fall air that Lancaster does better than anywhere I've ever been. Gloria and Leroy arrived at 6. I had not told Clyde or Wanda they were coming. Clyde was on the couch watching TV in my living room. Wanda was in the kitchen. When they heard the front door open and saw a woman in a blazer carrying a briefcase walk in behind me, the mood in that room changed fast. Clyde stood up. "What is this?" "Sit down, Clyde," I said. Something in my voice must have told him this was not a conversation he could talk his way out of, because he sat. Wanda came to the kitchen doorway and stayed there. Gloria set her briefcase on the coffee table and opened it without any ceremony. She placed Leroy's financial report on the table first, 14 months of transactions, every transfer mapped to $1, every destination account identified. Then the bank authorization form with the forged signature, then the POA filing with the fabricated physician notes, then the email thread with the real estate broker. Clyde looked at each page as Gloria set it down. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Then I took out my phone and pressed play. His own voice came out of that speaker and filled the room, clear as anything. My father owns the property on paper, but he's been dealing with some health issues. Cognitive stuff, on top of the heart surgery. Once the legal paperwork clears, probably another few weeks, we can move as fast as you need. Wanda put her hand over her mouth. Clyde said, "That was a private conversation. You can't use that." Leroy stepped forward. "Ohio is a one-party consent state. Your father consented to the recording." Clyde turned to me. His expression had shifted. The settled, certain look was gone. What was underneath it was something harder to name, not remorse. More like a man recalculating. "Dad," he said, "you have to understand what we were trying to do. You had a heart scare. You were not in a position to manage all of this on your own. We were protecting you." I let him finish. "I wired every circuit in this house." I said, "I built that back porch with lumber. I milled myself. I installed the panel you told a stranger was a selling point. I was never the one who needed protecting." He didn't have an answer for that. Gloria laid out the terms: full repayment of the $27,000 plus applicable interest, immediate withdrawal of the power of attorney application, a signed statement acknowledging the unauthorized account access to be held in escrow and filed with the court only if they violated the agreement, and they had 72 hours to vacate the premises. If they declined, she would file the criminal complaint the following morning. Clyde looked at the documents for a long moment. Then he looked at me, and I think he was searching for something. Some version of his father who would still find a way to let this go, who would fold the paperwork back up and say we could work it out as a family. That man had been sitting on a cheap mattress in a storage room for 3 weeks. He was done. Wanda signed first. Her hand was shaking. Clyde signed after, his signature hard and fast, like he was angry at the pen. Then I slid one more document across the table. "I updated my will 3 weeks ago," I said. "You've been removed as beneficiary. The estate will go to a foundation in Norma's name for adult literacy programs in Lancaster County." It was something she always wanted to do more of. Clyde stared at the page. Then he looked up at me one last time. I looked back at him and did not look away. They were gone by Sunday afternoon. I stood on the front porch and watched them load the car. Clyde did not say anything to me on the way out. Wanda stopped at the bottom of the steps and said, "I'm sorry, Gerald." I nodded once. That was enough. When their car turned the corner and disappeared, I went back inside. Leroy helped me carry Norma's reading chair back to its spot by the front window. We hung the family photos in the hallway, every one of them, including the Niagara Falls shot from our 25th anniversary. I put her 30th anniversary frame back on the dresser. I put her ceramic ring dish back on the nightstand where it had always been. Then I went out to the south fence and checked on her herb garden. The rosemary had survived the whole ordeal, a little overgrown but solid, still there. Leroy moved into the upstairs room a few weeks later. He keeps an eye on the financials and has been working with Gloria to make sure the restitution payments come in on schedule. Every morning we have coffee on the porch. The swing still creaks the same way it always did. People ask me sometimes if I regret how it ended, and I tell them the same thing every time. I gave my son every chance I had to give, but there is a difference between keeping the door open and handing someone the key to everything you spent your life building. They thought they were dealing with an old man who had run out of fight. They forgot that I spent 34 years doing work that punishes impatience and rewards the man who takes his time and does it right. My name is Gerald Sutton, and this is still my house. If someone in your life has ever tried to take what you built, you know exactly what this felt like. And if you've never had to fight for what's yours, I hope you never do. But if the day comes, remember this. Stay calm, stay patient, and make sure you have everything you need before you make your move. Hit that subscribe button if this story meant something to you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I read every one, and I'll see you next time.